Hi guys, so recently I got my first ever mortgage and I wish that they had told us how to do this in school because I feel like I made a lot of mistakes, I learned a lot of things, I spent a lot of time worrying about stuff, and I am creating this guide to help you guys to not make the same mistakes as I did. So the very first step is you're going to have to prepare your documents. So all you're going to need is pay slips from your work, bank statements, proof of ID, address history for the last 5 years or so, national insurance number if you're in the UK. If you have someone helping you pay for the mortgage, make sure that you have a letter from them to prove it. So if you've got all that stuff, then let's begin. So the first thing you need to get is a mortgage in principle. And this is a document from a bank, a mortgage provider, that basically says this is how much we are happy to lend you based on different parts of your financial situation. So if I click on this, you'll see it says here, we're letting you know how much you could borrow. So if we start, you want to buy a home. Let's say it's your first home and you're just doing some research and it'll be just you buying. You know, obviously fill this out in the way that's right for you. But you'll notice here that they'll do a credit check and you can use your agreement in principle to view properties and apply for a mortgage. So let's say you're wanting to buy something that costs 200,000. Well, you've got to pay a lump sum upfront, which is at least 10% of the value of the property. So in this case, I would have to pay at least 20,000. So it's a lot to save up. If you're happy with that, if you're happy to proceed, then let's continue. And then you can see here the deposit percentage, 10%. And the loan to value is basically the amount of money you're actually borrowing relative to the price of the property. So we're borrowing 180,000 because we're paying the other 20,000 up front, and that means you're borrowing 90% of the value of the property. So it's dead simple. And let's say that you've saved up already, you've got your deposit. The next parts, they're just going to ask you personal details and to provide your ID and stuff. So I'm not going to go over that. Very easy form to fill out. Once that's done, they will usually just email you a little PDF file that says, yes, we agree to lend you, say, 180,000, for example. Once that's done, we can have a look at mortgage rates, because some of these mortgage calculators will have an area where you type in the interest rate, but we don't know what the interest rate is at the moment until we do a little bit of Googling. So I've done this just now. It's now June 2026. So at the moment, the rates for first-time buyers are looking like this. Now you'll notice that some of these are fixed rates for a certain length of time. One of them is variable. Now the variable rate means the rate could change every year or every so often. That is kind of scary to me because there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now that could impact interest rates. So you have conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine, you've got a presidential election in the US, and even though these are not in the UK, there's still like a big knock-on impact to the global economy. And so for me personally, I don't like the idea of my interest rates being able to change every now and then to something that I can't predict. So I personally have gone for the 5-year fixed, and that means that for the next 5 years, I know exactly how much I'm going to pay each month, and I can plan my budget around that. So that's what I would recommend for you guys as well. It's worth noting that the more deposit you pay upfront, the lower your interest rates will be. So if you want to save money long term, I would say put down as much deposit as you can. And I was told that the lowest interest rates are unlocked when you get to 40% deposit. Now obviously that's a lot of money for most people, but I'm just saying sometimes it's worth saving a little bit longer to reduce your interest rates long term. And I'll show you from the mortgage calculator how much of an impact that has. So I've put in, we're borrowing 180,000. And the default period here is 25 years. That's quite a normal mortgage term. The longer you spread it out, obviously that would reduce your yearly and monthly payments. But overall, your total interest would actually increase the longer you have the mortgage. So if you are confident about your work situation and your income streams, then by all means, feel free to reduce that. So if we switch this to say 15 years, I'm going to calculate that. So you'll see here the total repayment for 15 years for 180,000 is 248,000. So total interest 68,000. If we move that back to 25 years and recalculate that, your total interest is 120,000. So even though you reduced the length of the mortgage term by 10 years, you basically reduced your interest by half. So long term, it's just great to pay off your mortgage as soon as possible. For many of us, that might not be an option, but if you do come into a lump sum of money, say you receive an inheritance or something like that, you win the lottery, things can happen. So it's worth considering reducing your mortgage term. We know now you'd be paying roughly $1,000 a month. Again, that's something you want to think about. Can I afford to pay that? What kind of salary would I need? Would I need to change my lifestyle? And so on. Now that we know we can borrow this much from the bank, the fun part begins, so you can start looking for properties. I've just looked at a random advert here for something around 200,000. So what you want to do is, once you find a property that you like, and you like the way it looks, and you like the area and the price, get in touch with the estate agent and ask for a viewing. And then you will physically go and visit the property with an estate agent to guide you around, and you can ask them lots of questions about the property as well. Now, one thing that's worth doing is researching other properties in the area to see how much did they sell for, how much are they worth, have prices gone down or up in that general area over time, and you can kind of piece together clues about what kind of price you should be paying for this. Like, is it overpriced, is it underpriced, and so on. If you look at the property and you view it and you think this is the one for me, then you basically bid for the property, and the highest bidder wins, of course. Once you have your bid approved, once you've been agreed that the seller wants to proceed with your offer and nobody else's, then you should go back to the bank and say, hey, I want to buy this property, the seller has agreed, so will you please lend me the money? And then you kind of go back and forth filling out the forms with them. At this point, you'll need to get a solicitor involved. So you'll need to go to a firm that does property sales. You are required, when buying a property, to have a solicitor representing you, and similarly the seller also needs to have a solicitor for them. And really the communication only occurs between the two solicitors going back and forth. Normally you and the actual person selling the property would not have direct communication, and this is probably a good thing, because the solicitors will know what they're talking about and all the legal and financial jargon. So that's a legal requirement. Now, you will have to go to your solicitor in person to sign some documents every now and then. Now, once everything has been signed, let's talk about the mechanics of the sale. The property costs 200,000. So at some point that money has to be transferred from your solicitor to the seller's solicitor. So you will send your deposit money to the solicitor. This is around a week or two before the sale, and around the same time, the bank from whom you're borrowing 180,000 will send that 180,000 also to your solicitor. So at this point in time, your solicitor is holding that entire 200,000. On the sale date, your solicitor transfers that 200,000 to the seller's solicitor, and then you make an agreement to get the keys physically, and that will usually happen through the estate agent, but it can also be agreed directly with the seller if you're both happy with that. That's the process of getting your first mortgage. Now, one thing I would recommend actually is you might want to get yourself a mortgage advisor or mortgage broker. I did that because it was my first time buying a property, and I wanted to have the input from someone who had many years of experience doing this stuff that was able to guide me. For me personally, I think it was well worth it. I paid around £400, but I am a bit of a worrier. So sometimes I worry, and especially with this being by far the biggest purchase I've ever made, lots of money involved, lots of things that you don't want to go wrong. Having a mortgage advisor there to give me that comfort and to be able to ask questions on my behalf, that was really, really useful. And it just meant, I could sleep well at night knowing that I've got an expert looking into this stuff. So for me personally, I had a great experience with my mortgage advisor, and I think it's a good idea to go down that route if you have any kind of uncertainty. So I hope that's helpful to you guys, and all the best in finding your dream home.